Warning, child corn is discussed and attempted essay is portrayed. Noah smiled back at me, that dumb, perfect, unguarded smile that made me feel both safe and monstrous all at once. I'm letting him love me, I'm letting him give himself to me, and I'm doing nothing but taking it. I deserve to feel this guilt. I deserve to feel it in every bone of my body. I'll never tell him I can't, not if I want him to stay happy, not if I swallowed hard and pressed a kiss to the top of his head, letting the silence stretch between us. Inside, I burned. Inside, I hated myself for every second of comfort I stole from him while letting him believe it was mutual. And still, I didn't stop. "I love you," my heart said, breaking quietly inside me. Noah didn't notice. I was a coward lying there beside him, unable to tell the boy next to me why I would do anything, say anything, or do anything to keep him here. To keep him where I believed he had to be, with me, always with me. That was the truth I never let surface. How and why I sought him out so long ago, when we were toddlers, before choice existed, before love had rules, before he knew how to pull away. I found him early and made myself essential. I grew into his life like something permanent. I lied to him every day, sometimes with words, sometimes by omission, sometimes just by letting him believe what I knew wasn't true, and he never suspected a thing. I knew he was in love with me, or at least infatuated with me. I carried that knowledge like a weapon. I used this information to manipulate, tempt, and control where he wanted to be. He was protection. I leaned on it, shaped it, relied on it whenever I needed reassurance, comfort, or proof that I mattered. I took and took, letting his feelings stretch and warp until they existed mostly for me. Noah gave himself freely. I accepted selfishly. And the worst part was that I understood exactly what I was doing the entire time. I just never stopped. I just smiled, watching him carefully, feeling that familiar warmth. He didn't need to say it, but I knew. Every little gesture, every laugh, every wide-eyed grin, it all told me how much our bond mattered, and for today at least it was perfect. We hardly fight, which is so unusual, but somehow it works for us. Most of the time I was the one in the wrong, and Noah, well, he was too innocent even at 17 to ever be at fault for anything. "I'm sorry," I said more times than I could count, sometimes for hurting his feelings, sometimes for inconveniencing him even when it was something small. I couldn't risk him leaving me at any time, so I apologized regardless of who was at fault. "I didn't mean to upset you," I'd add, watching his eyes soften as he shrugged it off. "No, really," he'd say, a small, genuine smile lifting the corners of his mouth. "It's okay, you don't have to apologize." But I always did. It felt natural, like breathing. I couldn't stand the thought of him feeling hurt because of me, and every time he forgave me, I realized how rare it was to be this close to someone, to have a friendship so delicate and yet so resilient. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking I shouldn't have done that, and immediately, "I'm sorry, Noah," would spill out before I even had a chance to pause, and he, as always, would just shake his head, so patient it was almost painful. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't meant to be, but it was ours, and for us that was enough. I hated that part of me, the part that knew I was kind of using him every night. The nights he stayed close, letting me lean on him, trusting me, and I wasn't entirely honest with him. I made him think I loved him, and it was wrong. Every time he looked at me with that small, trusting smile, I felt a pang of guilt that I couldn't shake. "You okay?" he asked one night, his voice soft in the dark. "Yeah," I muttered, though I knew I wasn't, just thinking. He didn't push, didn't ask more, he never did, and I hated that my relief at his silence made me feel even worse. I was taking comfort in him, in his presence, while twisting it in my head to make it feel like love. "I have to make this right somehow," I thought as I traced the edge of his hand without looking. "I have to show him that he's more than just this, that he deserves more than me needing him to fill my nights." But for now, all I could do was stay quiet, pretend I was okay, and hope he didn't notice how tangled up I was inside. Noah slept beside me, trusting, unguarded, while I lay awake, drowning in the weight of what I'd turned his love into. I told myself I was keeping him close for his own good. I told myself he needed me. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I needed him, and I was too afraid to let him go. I was too afraid to tell my buddy why I needed his body right where he slept, and it killed me that he didn't know. Everything I did, every touch and word, was a temptation for him to stay. I couldn't survive if he weren't here. I remember that dark time before Lowe's Angels, and I shivered thinking of how Noah made everything better and safer. I was careful with it and reckless at the same time. I told myself I was just being a good buddy, just being steady, just being there, but underneath it all was the truth I never said out loud: I couldn't survive if he wasn't here. That knowledge lived in me like a quiet panic. Sometimes I'd remember the dark time before Lowe's Angels, before things felt possible, before the world widened even a little. The loneliness back then was sharp and hollow, the kind that echoed. I shivered just thinking about it, how unsafe everything had felt, how exposed, how empty. And then there was Noah. Noah had made everything better, safer, not because he tried to fix anything, but because his presence softened the edges of the world. He laughed easily, he trusted completely, he made the quiet feel less dangerous just by existing beside me. I told myself I wasn't trapping him. I told myself he stayed because he wanted to, but still, I measured my words, softened my tone, stayed close enough that leaving would feel wrong. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I was terrified of being alone again. I can't go back to that, I thought, the memory tightening my chest. I won't survive it. So I stayed gentle, I stayed constant, I stayed necessary. And every time he smiled at me like I was safety itself, I felt both relief and shame, because I knew how much I needed him to believe that. I could have chosen anyone in that lunchroom when I met, and my life and plan would have gone right without a hitch. Wayne and Noah were monkey wrenches in the oil. Once my money reaches my hands, I'll pay them both off and escape. Family events and holidays were my least favorite days of the year. Every 10 days, it seemed, my relatives would come to town, filling the house with noise and forced cheer, and pinch my cheeks as if I were some permanent child. I hated it. I hated the questions, the fake interest, the way they pretended to know me while really only seeing the version I was expected to be. I smiled, nodded, laughed on cue, but inside I counted the minutes until they left. They didn't see me, not really, they never had. And yet, each visit reminded me of how trapped I was in their world, a world that demanded appearances, hollow affection, and gratitude I didn't feel. Holidays were worse: candles and laughter, presents and endless chatter. My relatives were celebrating connections I had long since stopped believing in. I endured it, as always, because complaining would be a scandal and rebellion would make me the family disappointment. So I endured, quiet, invisible in plain sight, thinking of the freedom I would one day claim. I hated it. I hated the questions. How are you? What are you doing with your life? When will you visit more often? All of it assumed a familiarity I didn't feel. I smiled, nodded, laughed on cue, but inside I was counting the seconds until they left, imagining their cars pulling away and the silence that would follow. They didn't see me? Not really, they never had. And yet, each visit reminded me how trapped I was in their world, a world of expectations, fake affection, and obligations I had never signed up for. The more they pried, the more I retreated inward, burying myself behind polite nods and carefully measured words. Holidays were worse: candles, laughter, presents, endless chatter about things I didn't care about. Everyone was celebrating connections I had long stopped believing in. I endured it because complaining would be a scandal and rebellion would make me the family disappointment. So I endured, quiet, invisible in plain sight, thinking of the freedom I would one day claim. Noah, if he were there, would have been different. He wouldn't care about pinched cheeks, superficial questions, or the endless small talk. He would just sit beside me, a calm presence in the chaos, and somehow make all of it bearable. But he wasn't there yet. For now, it was only me, silent and observing, imagining the life where I could escape it all, and maybe, just maybe, where someone like Noah would finally be there to make the world feel less suffocating. Family events were still a trial, but this time Noah was with me. Even as the relatives barged in, pinching cheeks and asking questions, he stayed quietly by my side, a steady presence I didn't have to explain. "Don't let them bother you," he whispered, nudging my shoulder as Aunt Julia leaned in for another cheek pinch. His voice was soft, calm, protective. I didn't have to answer, I just let him be there. Noah had this way of making everything smaller, more manageable. He didn't talk over anyone. He didn't argue. He just existed beside me, lending a kind of armor I didn't know I needed. When my uncle prattled on about my future plans, or lack thereof, I felt a wave of irritation, but Noah just smiled at me, eyes warm, and suddenly it was tolerable. He was loyal in ways that went unnoticed by everyone else. When cousins crowded in, asking questions, he shifted slightly so I could lean into him. When conversation veered into family drama, he stayed grounded, steady, like an anchor in the chaos. I caught him watching me at one point, a small smile on his face, patient, unjudging. The world outside could be absurd and exhausting, but Noah didn't care. He didn't need me to perform or explain. He just sat there, loyal, sweet, and quietly devoted, and for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. He wasn't just a presence. He was protection, companionship, affection, and safety all wrapped into one. And I knew, even as the relatives chattered and laughed around us, that having Noah by my side made all of this bearable, and I wouldn't be alive today at 17 without it. Tonight, like most nights, the shame, guilt, and lies made me sick. I would walk to the bathroom and lock the door, waiting for the bile to creep up my throat and ransack my stomach. I threw up usually 4 nights a week. The emotional tension inside my heart caused me to vomit ever since a few days after my 15th birthday. I don't remember much from when I was 2, except that the world was loud, bright, and unbearably close. Family events were worse. Every 10 days it seemed my house filled with noise. My aunts fussed over me like I was fragile china, pinching my cheeks, cooing my name, saying, "Tate, look at you, such a big boy." I didn't like it. I didn't want their hands on me. I hated the way they laughed, as if the world should be perfect just because it was a holiday. Christmases were worse than normal days in my house. The tree sparkled too brightly, ornaments dangling where I could reach but never for long enough. Presents piled up under it, wrapped in paper that crinkled too loudly when someone touched it. Uncle Joey would swoop in, patting my head, exclaiming, "Now, Tate, what do you want for Christmas? Speak up." I didn't speak. I just buried my face in my mother's arm or stared at the floor, wishing for silence. And then there was Noah. He wasn't in my life yet, not really, but when I first noticed him, he was sitting quietly in the corner, watching me the way he would for years to come. He was loyal, patient, small, and a little bit serious even as a toddler. He didn't yell, didn't touch me, didn't laugh too loudly at my discomfort. He just existed, and somehow that made the room less suffocating. One day, during a birthday party, Aunt Julia picked me up, pinched my cheeks, and said, "Oh, you're getting so big." I squirmed, trying to pull away. Noah, sitting nearby, slid his hand gently over mine as if to steady me. "It's okay," he murmured, barely above a whisper, and for the first time I felt it might be okay. I didn't understand him yet, didn't understand why his presence mattered more than the gifts, the laughter, or the chaos. But something inside me recognized safety. Something inside me decided I needed him to stay close. By the time I turned 4, I knew 2 things. Family events would always be unbearable, and Noah made them bearable. By age 5, family events were still loud and tough, but I learned to get through them, or so I thought. Every 10 days or so, relatives came with questions, pinches, and smiles that felt like traps. "Now, Tate," my grandmother would say, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, "what are you reading? Are you doing your schoolwork? You must tell me everything." I nodded politely because arguing or ignoring them only made them lean in harder. But inside, I was counting down the minutes until their cars drove away, until the quiet of my own room swallowed me whole. Noah had started following me everywhere by this age. Not because I told him to, not because anyone asked, but because he seemed to know I needed him. He would sit beside me on the couch during the chaos, handing me a small toy or a cup of juice as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It'll be okay," he whispered once when Uncle Joey started one of his endless stories about himself. I barely looked at him, but the warmth of his hand resting lightly over mine settled something in my chest. Birthdays were no better. I hated when relatives forced me into the center of attention. "Tate, blow out the candles," my mom would insist, leaning too close. The candlelight felt like it was burning into my eyes. Noah sat beside me, cheeks puffed in a gentle imitation of blowing out the flame himself, and I laughed despite myself. It was ridiculous, but it helped. Noah didn't just endure these gatherings. He shielded me from them in small ways only I noticed. He didn't stop my relatives from smothering me with affection, but he softened it, offering a quiet, unjudging presence I clung to. By 7, I understood 2 things. Family events would never change, and I could survive them only with Noah by my side. He was my quiet in the storm, and I had begun to rely on him more than I admitted even to myself. By the time I was 8, family events weren't just loud, they were strategic. Every Christmas, birthday, or random holiday visit felt like a performance, a test I didn't sign up for but was expected to pass flawlessly. "Come on, Tate, smile for the picture," Uncle Joey would call, waving a camera as if it were a weapon. I forced a grin, teeth showing just enough to satisfy him while my stomach twisted. Noah was beside me as always, calm and unassuming. "Ignore him," he whispered, leaning close so I could hear over the chatter. "It doesn't matter." I did ignore him, not because I was brave but because his presence made it possible. Somehow, simply knowing he was there, that he understood, that he didn't need to say anything else, made the room less unbearable. I hated cameras. I hated what they demanded of me, the expectation that I should perform, pretend, smile on command, and help construct some polished facade as though that facade were gospel. To everyone else, a camera was simply a machine for capturing a moment. To me, it was a warning. Cameras became a symbol of performance. But that wasn't the only reason I hated them. Before I moved to Los Angeles, whenever my mother went shopping, my father would take me to his photography studio. It was hidden on the 5th level of our enormous house, just beyond his office. He had built the room himself, concealed it so carefully that my mother never knew it existed. That room was where cameras stopped being innocent. My father photographed me, but these weren't the sort of photographs you'd find in a high school yearbook or displayed proudly on the walls of an estate. He exploited me. He sold photographs of me to wealthy men in New York City, turning something that should have belonged entirely to me, my privacy, my childhood, my body, my sense of safety, into something from which he could profit. And he recorded what he did. Photographs, video recordings, evidence of things I never wanted preserved. That was why cameras frightened me long after I escaped him. I didn't hate photography because I thought photographs were ugly. I hated what cameras represented to me. They represented a childhood in which someone else controlled the lens, controlled the room, controlled the story, and made me feel as though I didn't have the right to say no. So when Noah's 18th birthday arrived, I didn't want cameras near me. And on the trips and photo sessions that followed, I kept my distance whenever I could. People probably thought I was being difficult. Perhaps they thought I was vain, antisocial, or simply uncomfortable having my picture taken. They didn't know. They didn't know what my father had done with cameras. They didn't know that every flash could drag me backward into that hidden room. They didn't know that, for me, a photograph wasn't merely a photograph. It was a reminder. A birthday wasn't simply a birthday anymore. A camera wasn't simply a camera. And after everything my father had taken from me, I wasn't ready to let another lens become part of my life. Maybe someday I would be. But that day hadn't come yet. It was still too soon. But that wasn't the worst or the most nefarious reason I hated cameras. Every photograph taken of me during my childhood felt like evidence of a crime. When I took Riley on a tour of the house and watched him stop to look at the photographs of my family, I didn't see memories hanging on the walls. I saw exhibits. The entire house suddenly felt like a crime museum, and I was the centerpiece of its collection. My mother, especially Talia, would sometimes show Noah and his friends from Brown University photographs of me. There were pictures of family trips, visits to auto shows, sewing trips, historical sites, and countless other outings with relatives. To everyone looking at those photographs, they probably appeared harmless. A child traveling with his family. A normal childhood. Happy memories preserved in an album. But I knew what those photographs concealed. Some of those trips had been arranged under the pretense of ordinary family visits when, in reality, relatives were using them as opportunities to isolate me and abuse me. My mother's involvement made the betrayal even harder to understand. What should have been family gatherings became occasions that placed me in danger. The photographs never showed what happened behind them. They showed the smile before. The destination. The family members standing beside me. The car ride. The house. The vacation. But they couldn't show what happened when the cameras were put away and nobody else was watching. That was what made the albums unbearable. Every innocent-looking photograph could mark the beginning or aftermath of something terrible. Sometimes Noah came with me on those family trips. And sometimes, simply having another person there prevented anything from happening. A witness changed everything. It meant I wasn't alone. It meant someone was watching. It meant certain people couldn't isolate me as easily. Years later, when I looked at those photographs, I couldn't see the childhood everyone else imagined. I saw a record of places where I had been taken, people who had been around me, and moments when I had been vulnerable. The photographs weren't memories to me. They were evidence. And that was why I couldn't stand cameras. Everyone else saw a picture. I saw what the picture couldn't tell them. Noah didn't know. How could he? How could he have understood what those photographs meant when I'd spent my entire life learning how to hide the truth behind them? Every photograph hanging on the walls of the Blue family home seemed to contain someone who had participated in my suffering. There wasn't a single member of my family whom I could remember without remembering some combination of rape, exploitation, harm, abuse, enabling, grooming, or isolation. They hurt me. They groomed me. And then they expected me to smile and pretend everything was fine. That was what the photographs captured so perfectly: the performance. The smiles. The celebrations. The family vacations. The carefully arranged portraits. Everything looked normal. Nothing was normal. I hated being tape blue. Sometimes I fucking hated being alive. For so long, I had believed that my existence itself was a sin. I wondered what was wrong with me, why I had been born into that family, and why I had been forced to carry the consequences of things I had never chosen. There were even moments when I hated my mother for giving birth to me. It wasn't rational. But pain isn't always rational. And whenever someone admired those photographs, I couldn't stop wondering what they actually saw. Did they really not notice? Were they blind to what was standing in front of them? Or did they see it and simply decide they didn't care? That question haunted me more than the photographs themselves. Because every picture told the world that I had belonged to a loving family. And I knew the truth. The camera had captured the smiles. It had captured the vacations. It had captured the people standing beside me. But it had never captured what happened when everyone stopped pretending. Noah didn't know. And maybe that was the hardest part. He could look at those photographs and see a family. I looked at them and saw everything they had tried to hide. My own mother, Talia, worked in pediatrics, speaking for children and overseeing charities dedicated to helping them rise above cancer, poverty, and circumstances they had never chosen. She spent her life trying to save children. She should have started in her own fucking home. She should have made sure my childhood was safe. She should have protected me from the person who was supposed to be protecting me, the worst pedophile and human trafficker in California, my own father. And yet, years later, my mother wanted to know who had made me afraid of gay people, who had put that hatred into my head, who had taught me to associate homosexuality with something shameful. I didn't know whether I wanted to laugh or cry. How could I tell her? How could I look at my own mother and explain that the answer had been living beside her the entire time? None of this should have happened. None of it would have happened if my mother had seen what was happening in her own home. None of it would have happened if she had recognized the danger standing right in front of her. She had lived with that fucking man for 30 years. 30 years of sleeping beside him. 30 years of celebrating anniversaries. 30 years of building a home and a life with someone she believed she knew. And somehow she hadn't known him at all. That was almost impossible for me to stomach. Because my father was the answer to so many questions I had spent years asking myself. Why had I become the person I was? Why had I carried so much fear and hatred? Why had I entered relationships that hurt me? Why had people like Noah been pulled into the wreckage of my family? My father was at the center of it. I never would have started a relationship with Jay if my father had been a decent man. Noah never would have been brought into that wicked house if it hadn't been for Terrence. I never would have learned to hate gayness if my father had protected me instead of poisoning my understanding of the world. And I wouldn't have needed to survive my childhood if my father had possessed even an ounce of empathy, kindness, or respect for the law. My mother had spent her life advocating for vulnerable children. But I had been the child standing right in front of her. And she hadn't seen me. That was the wound I couldn't explain. Not simply that my father had destroyed so much of my childhood. but that the person who spent her life believing she could recognize children in danger had somehow failed to recognize her own son was one of them. She wanted to know who had taught me to hate. I knew the answer. It was the man she had loved for 30 years. Terrence was the predator who had taken my virginity when I was 2 years old. He trafficked me to half the elite in New York City. My father allowed all the rapists in my family to have open access to me. He made me complicit in some of the most disgusting and vile acts a human being could ever commit. My father chose to use me as the symbol of his most egregious criminal acts. Aunt Julia argued with Joey over the best way to arrange presents under the tree, pinched my cheeks for luck, and kept asking questions I didn't have answers for. What do you want for Christmas? Do you have any friends? Are you reading enough books? I gritted my teeth, muttered polite, empty answers, and felt my own patience shrinking. Noah quietly handed me a cup of juice, sitting so close that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. You don't have to answer them, he said softly. I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment the chaos disappeared. It wasn't gone, it never would be, but he made it bearable. Birthdays had become almost worse. Candles, songs, presents, relatives crowding around, commenting on how I had grown. I started noticing the pattern. Every time I felt cornered, every time I wanted to retreat, Noah was there, loyal, patient, unjudging, ready to offer a hand or a smile or a joke to distract me. By 10, I understood something I couldn't put into words yet. I didn't just enjoy having Noah there, I needed him. Every glance, every quiet comment, every simple act of loyalty made it possible for me to survive my family and maybe even pretend to tolerate them. By the time I was 11, family events had become predictable exercises in endurance. I knew the questions before they were asked, the fake smiles before they appeared, and the exaggerated handshakes before they landed. By 13, I understood the unspoken truth. Noah's loyalty had become essential, not just for comfort but for survival. Every joke he made, every reassuring glance, every quiet nudge to redirect attention, it all kept me sane. I depended on him more than anyone could know, and the worst part, I liked it, I needed it. Family events weren't just bearable because of Noah. They existed only because he was there, quietly making the chaos tolerable. By 14, I had mastered the art of surviving family events without looking like I was surviving. I smiled at Uncle Joey when he bragged about his promotions, nodded at Aunt Julia when she lectured me about manners, and laughed politely at Aunt Julia's endless commentary on my growth and potential. I had learned the timing, the tone, the exact words that kept them satisfied while letting me retreat inward. Noah was still there, sitting a step behind me, always observing, always steady. Don't let them get to you, he whispered once during a holiday dinner when my parents started arguing over who had spent too much on gifts. I let his words sink in like a shield. He didn't need to argue or intervene, he just needed to exist beside me. And he did, patiently, reliably, with a sweetness that made the chaos almost tolerable. Noah's loyalty grew with each visit. When a relative leaned too close, pressed a hand on my shoulder, or demanded attention, Noah would shift, placing himself beside me, a silent buffer. When presents were distributed, he made sure I wasn't embarrassed, handing me small items with a knowing glance. Would you ever leave the United States? I asked one afternoon like it was nothing. It was just another idle thought drifting through the room. Noah looked up from where he was sitting, legs folded, sunlight catching in his hair. He turned his head toward me slowly, considering it as if it were a serious question, as if my curiosity mattered. No, never, he said after a moment. He smiled, soft and certain. I like Los Angeles, it's my home. Of course it was. Noah needed roots the way some people needed air. I nodded, filing it away, already adjusting my internal timeline. Homes could be abandoned. People too, he wouldn't go even if I asked. What about kids? I asked next, too casually. I kept my voice light, neutral, as if I didn't already know the answer, as if I wasn't testing something. He blinked, surprised, then laughed under his breath. Maybe, he said, yeah, maybe a little girl. There it was, the future, his future, fully formed, earnest, ridiculous in its optimism. A house, a child, permanence, everything I had already decided to erase from my own life. I smiled at him just enough, the smile he trusted, the one that meant reassurance, not truth. That'd be nice, I said. Noah relaxed instantly, comforted by my approval, by the illusion that our ideas of the future aligned. He didn't see the distance between us. He never did. He thought proximity meant direction, that standing beside me meant he was walking where I was going. I leaned back, listening to him talk about nothing, about everything, knowing exactly how this would end. Lowe's angels, a little girl, a life rooted in place. Paris didn't have room for any of that, and Noah, sweet and loyal as he was, had no idea he was already answering questions he wouldn't survive the answers to in a few years after I paid him off with a check and my physical absence. That damn day came around again, my 18th birthday. I didn't forget to write the check. I never did. Forgetting would have been a death wish. Since I was 15, once a year like clockwork, I wrote a check for $100,000 addressed to a very specific mosquito buzzing around New York City, Wayne fucking Vaughn. Wayne loved the arrangement, loved knowing that all it took was his silence to keep my world intact. He liked to remind me subtly, smugly, that he knew my secret, the real one, the kind you don't confess, don't explain away, don't survive if it gets out. I folded the check neatly, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it with more care than I'd ever given a birthday card. Funny thing, this was the only ritual that ever mattered on my birthday. Cake, guests, congratulations, all background noise. This was the real celebration, another year bought, another year protected. Every year the same thought crossed my mind: I could kill him. It came easily, casually, like knotting the weather. I'd thought it through more times than I cared to admit. The how, the where, the cleanup, I was good at planning, always had been. But murder wasn't one of the crimes I chose to commit, not because I was moral. I wasn't naive enough to pretend that. I didn't kill Wayne because killing him would ripple outward. Police questions and curiosity would bring the worst kinds of attention towards my family. Attention was dangerous. Attention led to Noah. Wayne's bank account would lead back to me, and no way in hell would I tell why my check went to Mr. Vaughn. And Noah was the line I would never cross. I slid the envelope into my jacket pocket and exhaled slowly. One more year, that's all I ever asked for. One more year where Noah stayed untouched by the rot of my past, where he slept beside me without knowing what I'd done to keep that peace intact. People thought turning 18 was about freedom, about adulthood, about becoming someone new. For me, it was about staying exactly the same. Contained, controlled, quiet. Because as long as Wayne cashed that check, my secret stayed buried, and as long as my secret stayed buried, Noah stayed safe. And that was worth any price. Wayne Vaughn was a cunt, there's no cleaner word for him. He knew too much, and worse, he knew exactly how much that knowledge was worth. Wayne was never dumb enough to disappear, never reckless enough to push too hard. He understood leverage the way a parasite understands blood flow. I should know. It was leverage that got me into this fucking blackmail scheme to begin with. As long as my trust money arrived on time, he stayed pleasant, vague, and almost polite. We never discussed the unfortunate topic. We didn't need to. It sat between us like a loaded gun on a polished table. 77%. That's what it costs me every year. 77% of my trust was signed away neatly, legally, and in bleeding installments so Wayne could keep his mouth shut and his conscience clean, if he ever had one. He framed it as a business arrangement. I framed it as containment. People think money buys freedom. They're wrong. Money buys silence, and silence is fragile. It has to be fed. Wayne liked to remind me, never outright, never in writing, that he could always change his mind. That accidents happen. Those memories resurface. He'd smile when he said it, like we were sharing an inside joke. I smiled back. As long as he kept cashing those checks, no one never had to know. Never had to look at me differently. Never had to ask the questions I couldn't answer without destroying everything. Wayne thought he owned me. What he never understood was that I didn't pay him because I was afraid of him. I paid him because I was protecting Noah. And there isn't a man alive I wouldn't bleed dry or make disappear to keep that promise. I remember the first time Wayne called me. I was 15. I knew the number the second it lit up my phone. New York area code, private line. My stomach dropped before I even answered. Wayne Vaughn didn't call unless he wanted something. I closed my bedroom door and picked up. Yeah. Tate, Wayne said, warm and familiar, like we were old friends catching up. Happy to hear you still answer. What do you want and who gave you this number? I asked, no greeting, no pretending. He chuckled, still sharp. I was worried California might have dulled you. I pressed my back against the door, listening to Noah downstairs, the TV murmuring in the background. I needed him far away from this voice. You said we were done, I said. You said it was finished. I said I wouldn't talk about it, Wayne corrected gently. Big difference. My jaw tightened. I was a kid. Yes, he agreed easily, which is exactly why people would be so interested. Silence stretched between us. Wayne loved silence, he used it like a blade. You didn't call to reminisce, I said. No, he replied, I called because time moves forward and so do risks. Your family's profile is rising, lawyers ask questions, people dig. I'm calling to make sure we're still aligned. I sat on the edge of my bed. You said you destroyed that memory from your mind. Wayne laughed softly. Oh, Tate, never destroy leverage, you taught me that. My hands shook just barely. I curled them into fists until it stopped. What do you want? I asked again. Protection, he said, for both of us, annual, predictable, clean. You keep your life, I keep my silence. And if I say no? Another pause, longer this time. Then I start answering questions, Wayne said. And you start losing things, your school, your family, your legacy, that blonde boy you're so attached to. My blood went cold. You don't mention him. I won't, Wayne said smoothly, not unless I have to, which is entirely up to you. I swallowed. How much? He told me. Wayne wanted $10 million a year to keep his mouth shut. I didn't react, didn't argue, didn't flinch. I just did the math in my head and how much of my future I'd be carving away year by year. This is ongoing, Wayne added, not a one-time favor. Silence requires upkeep. I want it in writing, I said. Of course you do, he replied, pleased. I'll have my attorney draw something tasteful up for you. Tate was always a careful boy. I was a kid, I said quietly. Yes, Wayne agreed, and look how well you've handled it. The call ended without a goodbye. I stayed there for a long time, staring at the wall, breathing slowly until my pulse stopped racing. When no one knocked on my door a few minutes later, I opened it as if nothing had happened. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, just thinking. That was the moment I understood something clearly, finally. Wayne didn't owe me because of what I'd done. He owned me because I refused to let Noah pay for it. And I would keep paying. Every year. As long as it took. If the truth ever surfaced, if Wayne slipped up or someone tugged the wrong thread, I wouldn't sit around pretending it was survivable. I knew better. Scandals like that don't end, they fossilize. I'd load my gun from my room with bullets and forget the scandal by being dead. Scandals live longer than people do. They become shorthand, a name reduced to a cautionary tale that never stops being repeated. Everyone connected to me would be marked. My parents, my family, anyone who ever stood too close, and Noah most of all. Noah would be dragged into it whether he deserved it or not. Guilt by proximity, curiosity dressed up as concern, safety dissolved into rumor. I couldn't allow that. So I lived as if my existence itself was conditional, temporary. As long as I kept things quiet, controlled, and paid for, everyone else stayed clean, the story stayed hypothetical, the damage stayed theoretical. That was the logic I survived on. People assume fear makes you reckless. For me, it did the opposite. Fear made me precise. Fear made me patient. Fear taught me that endurance, silent, unseen endurance, was the only kind of protection that actually worked. I didn't think of it as despair. I thought of it as containment. And if containment ever failed, well, there are exits you don't plan to use, only acknowledge their existence. That knowledge alone kept me obedient. This was the 4th year I wrote a check to Wayne. 4 neat signatures, 4 envelopes. 4 reminders that a clever devil had been standing in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time and had decided to turn coincidence into a career. $400,000. That was the price of one mistake stretched thin over years, siphoned off in tidy increments to a man who'd once called himself my friend. A former friend implied distance, but Wayne was never distant. He hovered, he lingered, he collected. What vexed me most wasn't the money, I had plenty of that, it was the randomness of it. That if one hallway had been empty, if one door had stayed shut, if one person had minded his own business, Wayne Vaughn would be nothing more than a footnote I never thought about. Instead, he'd been blessed, rewarded for proximity, paid not for action but for witness. He didn't earn the money, he inherited it because of timing, through opportunism, through the simple fact that he'd seen something I would spend my life erasing. I signed the check anyway, calm, precise. Because regret was useless and resentment was expensive. Wayne didn't get paid because he deserved it. He got paid because I refused to let chance destroy the one thing in my life that mattered. And as long as coincidence kept breathing, so would he. Wayne fucked me over and he never missed a chance to remind me of the irony. The way one mistake had turned him into a beneficiary and me into a permanent donor, he liked to dress it up as fate. I called it extortion. Either way, the result was the same: another year sealed, another silence bought. Once the check was written, sealed, and out of my hands, there was nothing left to do. The ritual was complete. The threat was fed. I went back to my room. Noah was still asleep in my bed, curled on his side as he'd always been, quiet, trusting, and utterly unaware of the transactions that kept his world unshaken. The steady rise and fall of his breathing grounded me in a way nothing else ever did. Money couldn't do this. Control couldn't do this. Only him. I slipped in beside him carefully, easing the weight of the day off my shoulders. He stirred just enough to shift closer, instinctively seeking warmth, familiarity. I didn't move away. I never did. This was the point of everything. The checks. The restraint. The silence. Wayne got my money. The world got my compliance. Noah got peace. And for now, that was enough. I hoped briefly, bitterly, that Wayne would get flattened by a truck on his way to the bank. The thought flashed and burned out just as fast. I'd learned to let those kinds of wishes pass without feeding them. They weren't useful. They didn't change anything. Noah stirred beside me, his arms sliding around my shoulders, warm and familiar. He pressed his face into the space beneath my chin like he'd done 1,000 times before. "Happy birthday," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. I huffed a quiet laugh. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he said, tightening his hold a fraction. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied automatically, then softened it. "I am now." He tilted his head, studying me with that gentle seriousness that always made me feel seen and cornered at the same time. "You get weird on your birthday," he said, not accusing, observing. "Occupational hazard," I said. 18 comes with paperwork. He smiled faintly. "You don't have to be anything today, you know. You're allowed to just be." I stared at the ceiling for a second, then looked back at him. "You make it sound easy." "It is," he said, tapping my chest, "when you're here." I pulled him closer, resting my chin on his hair. Outside my room, the world could keep its secrets and its leverage. In here, there was only this: steady breathing, quiet warmth, and a birthday that didn't feel entirely poisoned. "Thanks," I said. "For what?" "For waking up with me." He smiled again, already drifting. "Anytime." Noah bought me a blue expensive coat for my 18th birthday, the one I'd been eyeing at the mall last week. $3,200, and it looked flawless. Sleek, structured, exactly the kind of piece that made me feel untouchable. I knew Mom must have helped him. There was no way a kid like him could have pulled that off alone. Still, he insisted it was entirely his gift. I kissed both his cheeks, soft and quick, feeling the warmth of his skin under my lips. He squirmed a little, smiling like a boy who didn't fully understand the power of what he'd just done. "Thank you," I murmured, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. "You looked, I don't know, like you'd melt if you didn't get it." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "You're ridiculous." "No, you're the ridiculous one," he said, still smiling, still bright-eyed. "I just like seeing you happy." And that was enough. His presence, his thoughtfulness, his simplicity, it all reminded me why I put up with Wayne Vaughn every year, why I played the careful game, why I endured. Noah was my world, my quiet, my certainty. Everything else was temporary, expendable. Next month, on Noah's 18th birthday, I'd drop off a letter and more evidence of Wayne's blackmail at my storage unit outside town. The plan was precise, methodical, necessary. Wayne would be reminded of who controlled what, and I'd reinforce the walls I had built around Noah, around myself. For now, though, it was enough to zip up the coat, feel its weight and structure settle over me, and sink back into bed with Noah. His head rested on my chest, and I let my fingers trace the line of his jaw absent-mindedly, silently marking the day as ours. Wayne could wait, the world could wait. Tonight, the only thing that mattered was the quiet, the warmth, and the subtle, unspoken promise that I'd protect him always. "Noah," I whispered almost to myself, You have no idea how much this matters. He hummed softly against my chest, oblivious, trusting, and perfect. And I vowed once again that no one would ever take him from me. The walls I had built around Noah, around myself, would protect my friend from Wayne and so much more. For now, though, it was enough to zip up the coat, feel its weight and structure settle over me and sink back into bed with Noah. His head rested on my chest, and I let my fingers trace the line of his jaw absent-mindedly, silently marking the day as ours. Wayne could wait, the world could wait. Tonight the only thing that mattered was the quiet, the warmth, and the subtle, unspoken promise that I'd protect him always. Breakfast was waffles and ham for me. Noah insisted on eggs and bacon, and I pretended not to notice how perfect his plate looked compared to mine. I drowned my waffles in ketchup and lemon sauce like it was an art form, and he watched me with the faintest mixture of amusement and disgust. "You really put that much on there?" he asked, nose wrinkled. "Do you want some?" I offered, shoving a syrup-soaked bite toward him. "No thanks," he muttered, sliding it back with a careful hand. "I'll stick to my eggs." Mom, of course, didn't miss a beat. She sat across the table, eyebrows raised so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. "Tate," she said, voice sharp, "are you pregnant?" I snorted, waving her off. "No, Mom, I'm just hungry. Waffles aren't going to eat themselves." Noah giggled softly, trying not to spit out a bite of bacon. I caught his eye and smirked. The way he was half amused, half disgusted was exactly why mornings with him were worth enduring the judgment of adults. "You do realize," Mom said, still suspicious, "that's a lot of ketchup." "It's a breakfast condiment revolution," I said, stabbing a ham slice with precision. "I'm leading the charge." Noah rolled his eyes, smiling despite himself. "You're ridiculous," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, and in that moment, amid the chaos of sauces and sizzling bacon, I realized that Wayne Vaughn, the school, the gossip, all of it didn't matter. Not when mornings started like this, with Noah beside me and nothing else mattered except our little universe at the breakfast table. Even the smell of lemon sauce over waffles felt like home. My relatives were flying in at noon to celebrate my milestone, and I could already taste the drama, my aunts whispering, my uncles judging, and my parents gliding through the room with their polished smiles like everything was perfect. I knew better, it never was. Noah made a face as I heaped ketchup onto my waffles, his nose wrinkling and his fork hesitating midair. "You really are something else," he muttered, voice low so only I could hear. The only relative I ever really enjoyed being around was Uncle Joey. He was easy, always smiling and very kind. He'd take me out for milkshakes and drive us around in his red truck like we were tourists in our own city. Tim and Julia tried, they really did, but it wasn't the same. And then there was Linus. My godfather, living in Los Angeles, the distance made him harmless. It didn't. Linus was the kind of man who counted down the days until I turned 18. I knew it. I think he knew I knew. Everyone in Los Angeles seemed to like me, or at least that's what he always wrote. Every month, like clockwork, a postcard would show up telling me how proud he was, how much I was growing, how I was getting more attractive every day. I never kept them. I'd read just enough to feel sick, then toss them straight into the trash. Noah would watch me sometimes, frowning like he couldn't figure me out. Like he didn't understand why something meant to be nice made me so angry. Each month leading up to my 18th birthday, the postcards multiplied. At first, it was just one envelope slipping in with the rest of the mail. Then two, then three at a time, like he was trying to take up more space in my life with ink and paper because he couldn't do it in person. Linus always wrote the same way, careful, polished, almost proud, but the meaning underneath it from Linus kept shifting. He didn't ask how I was anymore. He told me how I was becoming. How noticed I was becoming, how ready I was becoming. And always, somewhere near the end, a reminder that he wanted to be there when I turned 18. Not as a guest, not as family, something else left vague enough that I was never entirely sure I was imagining the wrong thing, but specific enough that I never felt comfortable reading it twice. I started throwing them away without opening them, sometimes just straight into the trash. It didn't stop him. If anything, it seemed to make him more determined, like silence was just another kind of encouragement. I wanted to tell my mother, I almost did. But she liked Linus. He was a business associate, someone connected to my father's world, one of those names adults said with a kind of automatic respect that I never understood. And I couldn't find the words to explain that something about him felt wrong without sounding dramatic or ungrateful or paranoid. He was one of my two godfathers. So I kept it to myself. By the time my 18th birthday got close, the postcards weren't arriving one at a time anymore. Some days there were 3 or 4 in a single stack, waiting for me like he was building pressure behind the walls of my life. Then came the call. His voice was the same as always, warm, confident, like nothing in the world could possibly be inappropriate if he said it calmly enough. He said he wanted to take me out, that he had plans for my birthday, that I didn't need to worry about anything, he'd handle it all. There was a pause after that, like he expected gratitude. Then he added almost casually that I could stay with him if I wanted, that I didn't have to rush back to anything after. Like it was a kindness, like it was an opportunity. I remember staring at the phone long after the call ended, trying to make the feeling in my chest fit into words that made sense. And Noah, he was there in the background of all of it, watching me more closely now, like he'd started to notice there was something I wasn't saying out loud. Like he was finally beginning to understand that some people don't show up in your life to celebrate you. They show up to claim you. On my 18th birthday, Linus arrived at my parents' house where I was living with Noah. Noah was my childhood buddy and Linus never really warmed to Noah. Unlike Uncle Joey, who loved Noah like a nephew and protected me from bad men, Linus wanted to fuck me since I was a child. No one but a few men in my family actually knew the truth. Linus had fucked me before I turned 18. I didn't remember it and he wanted to do it again. I could tell by the way Linus ogled and leered at me that he wanted my body. His attention made me uncomfortable. Everyone in Los Angeles wanted to fuck me or wanted me to part my legs so adults could thrust between them. Linus didn't hide it, and on that special day that arrived when I could legally be deflowered in California, Linus showed up with a bottle of wine, shoved it into my hands and said, "We're going to celebrate." Before I could even protest, he drove me to his hotel. Linus used the excuse in front of my mom that he was taking me to get a gift. His hotel door clicked shut behind us, the electronic lock engaging with a soft whir that sounded like a prison cell slamming closed in Tate's ears. Before he could even turn around, Linus's hands were on Tate, rough, greedy palms sliding up his sides, fingers digging into the bare skin of his hips where his shirt had ridden up. "Been waiting all evening for this," Linus muttered, his breath hot against the back of Tate's neck. Tate stiffened, his heart hammering. "Linus, stop, I don't want this. You're married to one of my aunts. I don't fuck family or in-laws." But Linus just chuckled, a low, throaty sound that vibrated against Tate's spine. "Aw, playing hard to get, huh? I like that. Makes it more fun when I finally break you in." Tate gasped and jerked forward, twisting away before that finger could press inside. "Number Linus, I'm serious, stop." Linus's hand clamped onto his hip, yanking him back. "Don't be like that, baby boy, you know I always get what I want." Tate's breath came in short, panicked bursts. He tried to pull away, but Linus's grip was iron. "Stop, Linus," Tate begged. "I'm involved with somebody and they wouldn't like it if you touched me." Linus laughed. "The entire family knows that your engagement to Jay and that unfortunate relationship ended 5 years ago. You don't have a fiancé anymore, Tate, and he isn't going to come to your rescue." He smirked. "Jay isn't going to hurt me, you threw him over." Tate struggled. "You're my godfather, please just listen to." But Linus wasn't listening, he never did. His hands found the collar of Tate's shirt and yanked. Tate tried to twist away. Tried to gather the torn shirt and hold it closed, but Linus grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. The older man's face loomed close, his lips parted, aiming for Tate's mouth. Tate turned his head sharply, his cheek taking the kiss instead. "No, I don't kiss men, I never do." Linus's eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "You'll learn to take what I give you." He grabbed Tate by both shoulders and shoved him forward. Tate's stomach hit the king-size mattress with a whoosh of air, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. "Get off me," Tate cried, his arms flailing, fingers clawing at the duvet. "Get off, get off." Linus laughed, a dark rumbling sound. "You're so tight and skinny." Tate grimaced. Linus wasn't Jay, the only man he'd ever wanted. Jay was that teenage boy from New York, his ex-fiancée, the one whose touch had been gentle, sweet, and wanted. This wasn't what. This was a violation. Linus shifted, and Tate heard the rustle of fabric. "Number please, Linus, please don't." "Shut up," Linus snarled, grabbing a handful of Tate's hair and yanking his head back. "You're only making it harder for yourself. The sooner you accept it, the sooner it'll be over." Tate's muscles coiled, his heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Through the haze of terror and disgust, a single thought crystallized: get out now. And then Tate struck. He drove his heel backward with every ounce of strength he had, straight into Linus's groin. The impact was solid, a sickening thud followed by a high-pitched, wheezing scream. "Fuck it." Linus's weight vanished as he doubled over, clutching his crotch, his face draining of color. He toppled off the bed, landing on the floor with a heavy thump, his breath coming in ragged, agonized gasps. Tate didn't wait, he scrambled off the bed. "Get back here, you little shit!" Linus's voice was strained, furious, but Tate didn't stop. He reached the front room, the door just ahead, tantalizingly close. His fingers found the deadbolt, twisted it. The chain rattled as he yanked it free. He grabbed the handle, pulled. The door swung open, letting in the cold, sterile air of the hallway. Tate stumbled out, barefoot, sobbing. Behind him, Linus was still on the floor, still gasping, still shouting curses, but Tate didn't hear them. All he heard was his own ragged breath, the pounding of his own blood, and the distant, desperate prayer that he'd never have to see that man again. Linus let out a guttural, strangled roar, his face twisting into a mask of pure rage after the blow to his groin. He didn't stay down for long. With a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline, he lunged forward, his large hand clamping around Tate's throat like a vice. He squeezed, cutting off Tate's air, and dragged him backward across the carpet toward the bed. "You little shit," Linus hissed, his voice a rasping growl. "You think you can fight me? You're not leaving this room unless I get some fresh boy." He slammed Tate down onto the mattress, the impact knocking the wind out of the younger man. Linus pinned him down, his heavy weight crushing Tate into the sheets. Tate thrashed wildly, his hands clawing at Linus's wrists, his eyes wide with terror. "Please, Linus, stop, please, just let me go," Tate sobbed, his voice cracking as he begged, his body shaking under the brute force of the man. Tate screamed, a raw sound of desperation, twisting his hips violently to avoid the intrusion. "No, stop it, please, I'm begging you." Linus ignored the pleas. Tate found a burst of strength. He coiled his leg and launched a powerful, desperate kick straight into Linus's stomach. The blow landed with a sickening thud. Linus gasped, the air leaving his lungs in a sharp oof. The force of the kick knocked him backward, breaking his grip and sending him reeling away from the bed. Tate didn't waste a second. He scrambled off the mattress, rolling across the floor in a panic. His hand shot out, grabbing the cold steel of the gun that had slid from his jeans during the struggle. Linus was still doubled over, wheezing and clutching his stomach. He looked up, eyes narrowing, but Tate was already on his feet. Without looking back, Tate bolted for the door, the sound of his frantic breathing filling the hallway as he slammed the hotel room door shut behind him, escaping the nightmare. 1 year later, on Tate's 19th birthday in 1987, the Blue House was quiet when Tate arrived home from Brown with Noah. The late March chill had settled over Providence, but the familiar warmth of his family home in LA did nothing to ease the knot tightening in his stomach. He'd hoped Linus would be absent, maybe on a business trip, maybe finally disgraced enough to stay away after the hotel room incident a year ago. But no, Tate had laughed bitterly at that. He hadn't told his mother about Linus' attempted rape, about Linus' hands on him, about the way his godfather had pinned him to the hotel bed and whispered how much he'd always wanted this. Tate told Joey what happened, and my uncle threw Linus out his hotel third-story window. Joey had been the one who found Tate trembling in the hallway after he'd kicked Linus in the balls and run. Joey had held Tate, told him it wasn't his fault, and promised that if that bastard ever came near him again, he'd end up in the hospital. Tate had hoped it wouldn't come to that. He'd spent the year avoiding Linus at every family gathering, staying close to others, never letting himself be cornered. But today, his birthday, he'd let his guard down for just a moment. He'd gone upstairs to drop his bag in his bedroom. The door clicked shut behind him, and he'd barely turned around when a hand clamped over his mouth. Tate's heart slammed against his ribs as Linus's body pressed him against the edge of the bed. The smell of stale coffee and cheap cologne invaded his nostrils. Linus was strong for a man in his 40s, soft around the middle, but with a wiry strength born from desperation. SHH, 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 Linus whispered, his breath hot and wet against Tate's ear. It's your birthday, Tate. I got you a present. You're going to like it, I promise. I've been thinking about this all year. That little stunt you pulled in the hotel, that was just a misunderstanding. I was going to be gentle, but you had to kick me. You hurt me, Tate, hurt me really bad. Tate tried to twist away, but Linus's free hand grabbed his hip, fingers digging into the denim of his jeans. But I forgive you, see? I still want you, I still need you, and you're going to learn to want me too. I've been patient. A whole year of watching you, waiting for you to let your guard down, but you're so damn careful, aren't you, always staying close to your mom or that brute Joey. Well, Joey's downstairs drinking beer and watching football. No one's coming up here, birthday boy. Linus shoved him forward, sending Tate sprawling face first onto the quilt-covered bed. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and before he could scramble up, Linus was on top of him, knees digging into his thighs, one hand fisting in Tate's hair and yanking his head back. Don't fight me, Linus growled, his other hand fumbling with Tate's belt. I don't want to hurt you, I mean it. I want to make you feel good, just relax, you'll see, you'll like it. Your dad was my best friend and I always promised him I'd look after you. This is looking after you, teaching you what a man can do for you. Get off me, you sick fuck, Tate managed to yell, his voice muffled by the mattress. Linus laughed a low, ugly sound. Sick. I'm the only one who really loves you, boy. Your mother, she's just your mother, Joey. He's an asshole who thinks he's protecting you, but I know what you need. I've known since you were born, since you developed, and especially when you'd walk around in those little shorts. No, 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 no. Yes, Linus hissed. Yes, you're going to love it, and after a few times you're going to come crawling back to me for more. They always do. The bedroom door slammed open. What the fuck is going on in here? Uncle Joey's voice cut through the air like a thunderclap. Linus froze, his hand still jammed inside Tate's pants. Tate twisted his head, tears streaming down his face, and saw Joey standing in the doorway. At 6'1", 225 pounds, Uncle Joey was the picture of pure, righteous, familial fury. His face was a mask of disbelief, then horror, then cold, murderous rage. We don't grape young boys in my brother's house. Get off him. Joey's voice was low, trembling with control. Get the fuck off my favorite nephew, Linus. Linus didn't move at first. His eyes darted between Joey and the window, calculating, then he slowly withdrew his hand, holding it up in mock surrender. Joey, it's not what it looks like, he asked me to. Bullshit, Tate screamed. Shoving Linus off him with a sudden burst of adrenaline. He rolled off the bed, landing hard on his knees, but he was already scrambling to his feet, jeans hanging open. He was trying to grape me, he was going to. He had his hand. Joey's face went white, then red. The veins in his neck bulged. Linus, you piece of garbage, I'm going to kill you once I get my fingers around your throat. I told you, I fucking told you. Joey listened, Linus started, but Joey wasn't listening. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbed Linus by the collar of his polo shirt and lifted him off the bed. Linus's feet dangled, his face turning purple as Joey choked him. You tried to rape my nephew twice, on his birthdays in my brother's house. Uncle Joey, wait, Tate started, not because he wanted to stop him, but because everything was happening too fast. Joey didn't wait, he slammed Linus against the wall so hard the plaster cracked. Linus's head snapped back, a spiderweb of fissures spreading around his skull. You're going to learn what happens to child molesters who hurt my beloved nephew, you disgusting pedophile and sick son of a bitch. Linus gasped, hands clawing at Joey's grip. I wasn't. He's 19, he's legal. He's your godson, you've been grooming him since he was born, and at 18 was when you first tried to grape this boy. I know all about it, Linus. I know about the closet at Christmas. I know about the beach house last May. I know about the fucking hotel room last March. Joey's voice was rising, a guttural roar that shook the walls. You think I don't watch? You think I don't keep my eye on you? I keep an eye on every boy and man around Tate because I know what kind of slimy insects money attracts. You think I didn't know what you were planning the moment you walked in this house tonight? Linus's eyes bulged. You let me. I wanted to catch you in the act. Joey's smile was terrible, cold. Wanted to make sure there was no doubt, no question, so when I dig a hole out back by the garden then put you in the ground, no one can say I was wrong. You're dead. He punctuated each word by bouncing Linus's head off the wall. Anyone who touches Totem with the intention of hurting the boy I love, I'll kill him and put the filthy maggot under the backyard. Joey enunciated each word. You're not the first predator I've warned off, and you won't be the last, but because Talia likes you, that's the only reason I'm not breaking your neck with a shovel and putting your bloody corpse under her rose bushes. Joey, no, please, I'll leave, I'll never come back, I swear. You swear? Joey laughed, a raw, ugly sound. You swore on my father's grave you'd take care of his grandson, you swore you'd be a good godfather, look at you now. He released Linus's collar and grabbed his hair instead, yanking his head back. No man touches Totem without my permission, and you never asked for my permission. You like touching people without their permission, let's see how you like it. He drove his fist into Linus's face. The crunch of cartilage was sickening, wet. Blood sprayed across the wall. Linus screamed, a high, keening sound, but Joey's other hand was already pulling him forward into a brutal uppercut that snapped his head back and sent teeth flying, 3 of them white and bloody, skittering across the hardwood floor. Uncle Joey? Tate's voice was barely a whisper. He was still on his knees, jeans still open, watching as his uncle became something monstrous, something beautiful. Joey didn't stop. He drove his knee into Linus's groin, and Linus folded like a paper doll, vomiting onto the floor. Joey grabbed him by the collar again and dragged him to the center of the room, then dropped him. Linus curled into a fetal position, hands covering his face, but Joey grabbed one of those hands and twisted until the wrist popped out of the socket with a wet crack. Don't, Linus sobbed. You don't get to say don't, rapists don't get to say no. Joey's voice was steady now, almost calm. You don't get to ask for mercy. You think my beloved nephew didn't ask you to stop, begged you to stop? You think he said don't when you had your hands down his pants? He grabbed Linus by the hair again and pulled him up to a kneeling position. Look at him, look at my crying nephew, see what you did. Linus's face was ruined, nose shattered, one eye swelling shut, lips split and bleeding. He turned his head, but Joey forced him to face Tate. Joey's nephew stared back, trembling, tears still wet on his cheeks, but something else in his chest, something that was hot, fierce, and alive. He didn't want Joey's help. He wanted to be the one breaking Linus's face. But watching Joey do it, watching the bastard weep and bleed, was the next best thing. Say you're sorry, Joey said. Beg for your life, beg me not to shoot you dead right here or paralyze your body by shattering your spine with my fingers. I'm sorry. Not to me, Joey's grip tightened. To him, to Tate, look at him and say you're sorry for trying to grape him multiple times as a guest in his father's house. Linus's eyes met Tate's. For a moment, something flickered, hatred, maybe, or shame. But then Joey squeezed his broken wrist and Linus screamed and the words tumbled out in a bloody mess. I'm sorry, Tate, I'm so sorry, please don't let him hurt me anymore, I'll never touch you again, I swear, I swear. Tate felt his lip curl. You're a pathetic piece of shit, Linus, you know that? You're not just a predator, you're just a loser who can't get off without forcing yourself on someone half your age. Linus whimpered. Joey nodded, satisfied. He released Linus's hair and stepped back, breathing hard. Totem is the most important thing in my life. I named this boy, his first and middle name is Totem and Joseph my surnames. I held him in my arms when he was seconds old and spent my entire life protecting his hide from chomos like you. I don't have kids of my own, so he's like a son to me. How dare you put your filthy hands on my blood? I love this boy. I love him, he's my only blood nephew. Tate has been under my protection since he was born, and you thought as an outsider, a friend of this family, that you could touch my most prized possession. If I ever see you within any close distance of Tate, I'll kill you on the spot. Get out of my brother's house. His voice was flat, final. Get out before I decide to finish the job by strangling the life out of your body. You come near Tate or my other nephew Noah, and I'll separate your spine from your brainstem. Linus didn't need to be told twice. He crawled toward the door, leaving a smear of blood on the floor, and dragged himself upright against the doorframe. His arm hung at a sick angle. His face was a horror show. He shuffled down the hall, moaning, leaving a trail of crimson. Joey watched him go, then turned to Tate, the anger drained from his face, replaced by worry. You okay? Joey crouched down on the bed where Tate was lying. Joey caressed Tate's forehead and cheeks, looking for bruises and scratches. After a few moments, Joey released Tate's face, but Joey was still terrified that Linus had actually assaulted his beloved nephew. Joey leaned down, pressing a kiss to Tate's cheek, wrapping his arms around his nephew's shoulders. Tate's hands were shaking as he pulled his jeans together, fumbling with the belt. I didn't need your help. The words came out sharp, defensive. I could have handled it. Joey's expression softened. I know you could, but you didn't have to. That's what I'm here for. Uncles protect their favorite nephews from predators. It's my job while I'm alive, kid. That's what families are for. He crossed the room and knelt in front of Tate, his big hands gentle as they covered Tate's trembling ones. You're safe now. He's never going to touch you again. I broke 3 of his fingers, his nose, and 3 of his teeth. He's going to need reconstructive surgery on that face. He'll remember tonight every time he looks in the mirror. Tate's breath hitched. He could press charges. Let him. Joey's smile was grim. I'll tell the whole world the true story, every detail, every time Linus cornered you, every time he put his hands on you. They'll lock me up, but they'll lock him up too, and I'll wear that conviction like a goddamn badge of honor. Any uncle who loves his nephew would have done exactly what I did, and no jury would convict an uncle for doing it. I love you, Tatum, Joey said as he kissed Tate's temple. As long as I'm alive, you'll never have to worry about predators hurting or taking what you don't want to give. Tate laughed, a wet, broken sound. You're insane, Uncle Joey. Insane about protecting those I love. Joey pulled him into a rough hug and Tate melted into it, letting himself be held. Happy birthday, kid. Sorry it got messy. Tate laughed. Aren't you afraid my fiancé, Jay, is going to come in here and beat you up for touching what's his? Joey laughed. I'm not afraid of your fiancé, Tate. If he tries to hurt you, I'll beat him up too. No man or woman ever touches my loving nephew. Tate buried his face in Joey's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of sweat and beer and righteous fury. Best birthday I've ever had. Joey teared up and then hugged Tate again. I know you pushed me away 6 years ago and I'm sorry for everything I did. It wasn't right. I know you've moved on and that you have Noah in your life and that he's the most important thing to you, but I still love you. I still want a relationship with you. Tate thanked his uncle again but adamantly stated that Joey had hurt him too badly and their relationship, the one Tate had with his uncle, was fractured. Then Tate left the room, leaving Joey on the spare bed to think over what had happened. Linus was in the hospital with 2 broken wrists, a shattered nose, multiple fingers in splints, a fractured orbital bone, and 3 missing teeth. Linus never pressed charges. He left town, moved to Europe, and never contacted Tate again until years after Joey died. The reconstructive surgery on his face cost him tens of thousands of dollars. He never tried to assault anyone again, not because he'd found morality, but because every time he looked in the mirror he saw the thing that had beaten him bloody. And every time Tate looked in the mirror he saw a survivor. Linus' assault on Tate was not the first nor the last, especially because Tate was very attractive, dressed well, his money attracted predators, and he was a public figure in LA. Tate wasn't at fault for drawing these bad people into his life, but where there's money, ambition seems to draw bad people. Many individuals would try to take advantage of Tate in different ways. Tate used the gun Joey had given him at 7 to protect himself, and even though Joey's relationship with Tate wasn't the same during adulthood as it had been when Tate was a child, Joey always protected his nephew against terrible people like Linus. No one in that house, especially Noah, ever found out what Linus had done because Tate didn't want anyone to know what happened. Tate didn't want people's sympathy or pity, so Joey never said a word. I controlled my fear and trauma by controlling how I ate and what I ate. During meals, my father noticed every time I put lemon on my waffles or cinnamon in my cereal. Something else? I asked, smirking. Try Legendary, I'm setting breakfast trends. Noah shook his head, a small laugh escaping him despite the disgust. You're gross. You love it, and I've tasted worse things in my mouth, I teased, leaning closer so my shoulder brushed his. His warmth hit me like a pulse, steady, grounding, and I felt a flash of relief that at least he didn't judge me as harshly as the world would. I don't know why I let you do this, he said, poking at the mound of waffles with his fork. It's alarming. Because, I said, smiling, I'm your gift, accept it. He rolled his eyes, but there was that soft warmth in his gaze that always cut through my anxieties. Even the chaos waiting at noon couldn't touch this, couldn't touch us. Not yet. I took another bite, savoring the tangy, sweet mess, and thought, let the relatives come, let the drama start. I've got this, and I've got Noah. And that, for the moment, was all that mattered. Noah followed me to my room like a lost puppy, his sneakers scuffing the hardwood floor. I rolled my eyes but smiled anyway. He always trailed after me whether he admitted it or not. We wrestled on the floor, limbs tangling in our usual chaos. I let him win, of course. There was a strange joy in seeing him triumph, even if only by inches. When he pinned me down for the final time, he beamed like he'd conquered Everest. Thanks, he said, leaning down and pressing a quick kiss to the tip of my nose, for letting me win. I laughed, shaking my head. You think you won, but really I just let you feel good about yourself. He stuck his tongue out at me, mischievous and affectionate all at once. Best buddy ever. I ruffled his hair, and the familiar weight of him against me grounded the swirling thoughts in my head. My Princeton letter was still in the mail, waiting somewhere between the mailbox and fate, and my future had never felt so fragile. I wonder if they'll accept me, I muttered, staring at the floor. All this, all the stuff I've done, does it even matter? Noah tilted his head, his brow furrowed. I think you'll get in, he said softly, like he already knew. They'd be crazy not to take you. I exhaled, unsure if it was relief or anxiety leaving my lungs. And you, where are you going? I asked, my voice quieter now. Have you even thought about it? Noah shrugged, looking down at his hands. I don't know yet, maybe somewhere close, maybe far, doesn't matter, he said, though I could see the worry flicker behind his blue eyes. I reached out and pulled him closer, my chest pressing against his back. Noah, I whispered, no matter where we end up, you're my constant, don't forget that. He leaned into me instinctively, like he already understood the gravity of my words even if he couldn't say them out loud. In that moment, wrestling on the floor, the future seemed like something distant, almost irrelevant. Right here, right now, was what mattered. And I silently promised myself I'd make sure Noah knew always that he had me no matter the distance, no matter the chaos waiting outside our door. I smiled at him, shaking the cash in my pocket just a little. I'm taking you shopping, I said, 10 grand in my pocket and you get to help me spend it. Noah's eyes widened a little, a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Milkshake? He asked cautiously, like that was the most extravagant thing he could imagine. 2 scoops and strawberry topping, I said, grinning, but only if you let me pick the flavors too. He tilted his head, considering it, then smiled shyly. Okay, I guess that's fair. I ruffled his hair and he nudged me back lightly. And maybe a few clothes, he added. Absolutely, I said. You get to tell me what you like. We're doing this my treat and nothing is off limits. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that always made me want to protect him, spoil him, and keep him close all at once. I don't know if I can spend 10 grand, he muttered, still beaming. You'll be fine, I said, looping my arm through his. I'll guide you. And with that, we stepped out the door, heading toward the car, already planning our spree and milkshake snack. My parents went all out for my big day. On my 18th birthday, Joey had found the perfect car and my parents had bought a blue Porsche 959, sleek and impossibly fast, gleaming in the sunlight as if it belonged in a museum. I slid behind the wheel, feeling the leather hug my hands, and Noah practically bounced in the passenger seat. This is insane, he said, gripping the door handle as if the car might lift off. Insane is my middle name, I said with a smirk, revving the engine just enough to make the car purr. Hop in, we've got a day to spend and I'm making sure it's unforgettable. We cruised toward the mall, catching a few envious stares, and slid into a VIP parking space near the entrance. Noah's eyes practically sparkled. You've never been in a car like this, have you? I teased. Nope, he admitted, glancing at the dashboard as if it might explode at any second. I laughed, looping my arm around him as we stepped out. Well, today's your lucky day. The elevators at the mall were another thrill. Noah pressed every button as if we were piloting a spaceship. I let him, enjoying the way he leaned against me, his warmth grounding me even in the chaos. Do you ever get tired of being spoiled? He asked, still grinning like a kid. Never, I said honestly, but it's nothing compared to having you here with me. He glanced up at me, that quiet, shy smile tugging at his lips, and I felt that familiar pull, protective, possessive, entirely mine. VIP parking, the purr of the Porsche, the slow climb of the elevator, it didn't matter. None of it mattered as much as having Noah right next to me, sharing every ridiculous, extravagant moment. He laughed, and just like that, the mall felt like our private playground. The next day during dinner, Uncle Joey raised an eyebrow across the table, clearly trying to hide a smirk. Tate, what in the world are you doing with your food? He asked, peering at my plate as if it might bite him. I shrugged, stabbing a piece of roasted turkey slathered in lemon juice. Experimenting, I said nonchalantly, it's culinary innovation. He blinked. Lemon on turkey. Absolutely, it brings out the flavor. I said confidently, ignoring the faint disgust curling his nose. Then there was the cheesecake. I'd smothered a slice in ketchup for good measure. Noah nudged my side softly, his expression a mix of horror and amusement. Tate, he whispered, seriously. What, it's delicious, I shot back, licking the tip of my fork. Uncle Joey leaned in closer, trying not to laugh, and the ketchup on cheesecake. Trust me, I said, grinning, it's an acquired taste, only the adventurous understand. Noah shook his head, hiding a laugh behind his hand. You're ridiculous, he said softly, eyes twinkling. And you love it, I teased, poking his side. He rolled his eyes again but didn't deny it. Family may have stared, whispered, or even muttered under their breath, but as always, Noah was my anchor. He didn't judge me the way they did, and I didn't care about Uncle Joey's raised eyebrows or the faint gasp from Aunt Julia. Tonight was about me, my birthday, and Noah by my side, even if my food tastes were insane. I stabbed another bite of turkey and smiled. Let them talk, let them whisper. As long as Noah's here, I could eat ketchup on cheesecake every day and love it. I hoped my special day wouldn't have any cons, no surprises, drama, or unexpected lectures about how I lived my life. For once, I just wanted it to be mine. I spent my birthday night after dinner in a hotel until 1, fucking a dozen women before falling out of a window. I walked home and slid into bed next to Noah, kissing his temple. The night ended like it always did, with Noah snuggled next to me in my bed, his small frame warm and steady against mine. The world outside could burn, but me, in this cocoon around Noah, nothing else mattered. He snuggled closer, unconcerned, trusting me completely as he always did. And I let him, letting the quiet intimacy of the night wash over us. No lectures, no explanations, just the simple comfort of having him near. Noah never needed to know the things I did or ate to protect his body. Tomorrow, the chaos would return, relatives, celebrations, and the world with all its expectations. But for tonight, none of it mattered. I closed my eyes and thought, he doesn't need to know, he never will, and that's just fine. And with that, sleep carried us both, safe in our little world where the rest of the world couldn't touch us. Uncle Joey kissed me goodbye before heading to Lax, ruffling my hair like he always did. Happy birthday, kiddo, he said with that crooked smile of his. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. I grinned, already thinking about how much trouble that advice could get me into. No promises, I replied, watching him disappear down the driveway. He was the last relative to leave, and suddenly the house felt quieter, emptier, but in the best way. My birthday had been chaos, presents, and odd food combinations, but it had been mine, and Noah's. I glanced over at him later that day, still curled up in my bed, half asleep, chest rising and falling like a little metronome of calm. I leaned over, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. You know, I whispered, being an adult is kind of amazing. He mumbled something incoherent, eyes fluttering open just enough to look at me with that sleepy, trusting expression. And I can't wait for your big day next month, I added softly. Your 18th is going to be unforgettable. Noah blinked, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You mean, as fun as yours? I laughed quietly, pressing a quick kiss to the top of his head. Even better, I said, and I'll be right there every second making sure it is. He snuggled closer again, and I let him, feeling the steady, quiet weight of him against me. Tomorrow would come with its own noise, its own chaos, but tonight I could just savor this. Noah here, me here, and the promise of more birthdays together. I leaned back against the couch, grinning at him. I spoke with Mom and Dad, I said, winking. Your birthday gifts are going to be epic. Noah's eyes lit up and he kicked off his shoes, wiggling his toes like a kid who'd just been promised the world. Epic? He asked, bouncing slightly on the couch. Absolutely, I said, looping an arm around his shoulders and pulling him close. I made sure everything's going to blow your mind. He leaned into me, resting his head against my chest. You always do that, he murmured, a shy smile tugging at his lips. I ruffled his hair, my fingers threading through the soft strands. Only because you deserve it, I said softly. Noah, you don't even know how much I plan for this day, for you. He looked up at me, cheeks tinged pink. I don't need anything that fancy, he said quietly, but I could see the sparkle of excitement in his blue eyes. Yeah, well, you're stuck with me anyway, I teased, pressing a quick kiss to the top of his head. So might as well enjoy it. Noah giggled, squirming a little under my arm. You're ridiculous, he whispered, but I could tell he loved it. I just smiled, holding him close. Ridiculous, yes, but only for you. Mom leaned back in her chair, spreading the papers across the table. Adoption papers, last name change, updated will, all of it staring back at me in neat, official handwriting. I nodded along to everything she said, agreeing to each step with deliberate calm. Quiet the conscience. Make it right. Protect him. I didn't want Tate to be my legal brother, but I couldn't say no. I threw up later, realizing my worst nightmare was coming true. Noah lounged on the couch, unaware, fiddling with the hem of his shirt and humming softly to himself. He had no idea what was being plotted around him. That was fine. He didn't need to. He shouldn't need to. Everything will be ready, Tate, Mom said, glancing at me with that satisfied look she gets when a plan is falling perfectly into place. Noah will have a family to count on, legally and permanently. My mom didn't notice my face cringe at the idea of Noah being a blue. I didn't want him as family, but I couldn't come up with an excuse to say no. I smiled, keeping my voice casual. Good, that's perfect. Noah stretched, rolling onto his side. Tate, can we watch a movie later? He asked, completely innocent. Of course, I said, leaning back and letting him think the world was as ordinary as ever. I let him stay in his bubble, laughing and safe, while I quietly made sure nothing would ever put him at risk. Little sweet Noah, your 18th birthday will be yours to enjoy. You won't even know the effort it took to make it so, and that's exactly how it should be. He smiled at me, oblivious, tugging at the blanket. You're the best, he murmured, curling closer. I didn't correct him. I let him believe it was just friendship. The truth was mine alone to carry, and I'd carry it for both of us. Noah doesn't need to know, not yet, not ever. Noah deserved it. After everything he'd brought into our house, his laughter, his calm, his quiet little presence that made even the worst days bearable, he deserved this, every bit of it. I glanced at him now, sprawled across the couch with his head tucked into my lap, fiddling with his sneakers. He had no clue the plans were being set into motion around him, and that was the way it should be. Innocence and ignorance were his shields, and I'd protect them fiercely. At least when the time came and I had to step back towards 4 years of college life, whatever twisted paths the world forced us onto. Noah would have a family, he would have money, security, everything to make sure he never had to rely on anyone who wouldn't protect him as I would. The money I would give him would protect him from everything he doesn't know, and that made me okay leaving Noah behind. He hummed softly, eyes half closed, completely unaware of the future I was shaping. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, careful not to disturb him. Sleep well, little man, I whispered. You've got the best years ahead, and don't worry, I've got you covered. He shifted closer, still oblivious, and I let him think it was all simple, normal, nothing to worry about. He didn't need to carry the weight of planning, of protection, of survival. That burden was mine and mine alone. 4 years, then I leave, but you'll never be alone. You'll never be without me, even if you don't know it. I meant it, and in the years to come, I'd really understand why I felt that way and how it would affect us. Tate had tried to leave Noah after they graduated from Brown, but he couldn't do it. Even with the millions he could give Noah to protect him from Tate's family, he still couldn't bring himself to sever the bond between them. For an entire year of college, Tate had cried himself to sleep, wrestling with the belief that leaving Noah was the only way to keep him safe. He knew that if he remained in Noah's life somehow, eventually, Noah would get hurt. Tate convinced himself that Noah would be better off without him. But knowing what you have to do and being able to actually do it were two very different things. The memories I have of Noah are my favorite. Noah climbed my tree again, the old one outside the window I call home. He only ever did that when he was here, like the tree existed just for him. I spotted his hands on the branch and felt my chest tighten. Are you insane? I hissed, sliding the window up. You're going to break your neck one of these days. You're no good to me, dead kid. He grinned, unfazed, and swung a leg over like he'd done it 100 times. I grabbed his wrist and hauled him inside before he could argue, my heart still thudding hard. Next time, I muttered, use the door like a normal person. But this is faster, he said, brushing leaves off his shirt. And dumber, I replied, but I was already checking him over out of habit, arms, shoulders, head, making sure he was fine. We settled into bed like we always did, no ceremony, just instinct. Noah curled up beside me, warm and familiar, and the noise in my head finally shut off. Outside, the world could keep spinning, demanding things from me, planning futures I didn't want to think about yet. In here it was quiet. He breathed evenly, already halfway asleep, and I stared at the ceiling for a while before closing my eyes. This simple closeness, this safety was enough. For tonight, it was everything. And as sleep took us both, I thought, as long as he's here, this place is home. I know Noah isn't dumb. He feels my heart racing, can feel it through my chest when I'm close to the blonde, but he doesn't understand why it happens. He never does, and I don't push it. Tonight it's worse. My stomach twists, a sudden, sharp betrayal. I barely make it to the bathroom before I throw up, my hands trembling against the sink. When it passes, I crawl back to bed, still shaking, and slip in next to Noah. He stirs, sensing my presence immediately, but doesn't ask questions. He just wraps an arm around me, warm and steady. I press my face into his shoulder, letting him anchor me without words. His heart is calm compared to mine, and I lean into it, breathing slower on purpose, trying to match him. Noah doesn't need to understand. He never has. Being here next to him is enough. He's always enough. Ever since I was 15, I learned exactly what buttons to push. A glance at a girl, a laugh at something someone said, they thought I was interested and I played the part. I knew how to turn heads and get attention, and I did it. My relationship with Noah was all smoke and mirrors, a parallel, a symptom. I told them every day what was wrong. How do you look at Noah and not see it? This non-platonic, non-romantic relationship with Noah was easy to understand, but no one looked. It was the result of a much deeper, devastating, unbearable truth of the love that dare not speak its name. No one ever guessed. These cunts were so outraged about my relationship with Noah, so no one could see any hints that this thing with Noah wasn't the center of Tate Blue's life, but a product of a love that dared never see the light of day or outside my checkbook. Noah noticed, of course, always did. He'd glance up at me, that quiet frown tugging at his lips, and then inevitably he'd wrap his arms around me tighter than before. "You don't have to look at her," he'd whisper, his voice low, almost desperate. I'd just smirk. "I'm not looking at her," I'd say, letting the lie hang just long enough, and he'd stay pressed to me, clinging as if the world might pull me away if he let go. The truth, it worked. Every time, his little clingy self, that anxious need to keep me close, it gave me exactly what I wanted. The comfort of having him near, warm and insistent, while everyone else thought they knew what was happening between us. He didn't understand why I smiled at him then, why I leaned into the hug, letting him squeeze until his fingers were almost painful. I didn't explain. I couldn't, not ever. That attachment, that trust, was mine to guide. And I guided it carefully, always. Noah hugged me tighter and I let him, feeling the quiet, perfect satisfaction of knowing just how much he needed me. I was invited to practically every high school party at big houses, loud music, people throwing themselves at me, but I stopped going, not because I didn't want to, not because I didn't enjoy the chaos. It was for Noah. Every time I considered going out, I'd see that look on his face, the tiny crease between his brows, the way his hands clenched when he thought I'd choose someone else over him. "Why can't you just go?" he'd ask softly, trying to hide the hurt. "Because I don't want to," I'd say, brushing past him, though I knew the truth. "Noah," I whispered one night as he clung to my side, "I don't go to parties because I know it makes you upset. You know I care about you more than some stupid dance or loud house, right?" He looked up at me, a little guilty, a little relieved, and hugged me tighter. I don't like losing you, Tate," he murmured. "Then don't worry," I said, pressing a kiss to his temple. "You won't, I never leave you." From that day on, parties didn't matter. Popularity didn't matter. Nothing mattered but Noah and the quiet nights we spent together, safe in the knowledge that he was always mine and I was always his. I don't even think about it until I'm climbing the roof of the high school, the wind in my hair, heart pounding like a drum. And then I just let it out. "Tate Blue loves Noah Lunis," I yell, my voice cracking across the schoolyard. The reaction is immediate. Half the school freezes mid-step, whispers erupt into shocked gasps, and a few kids point. Teachers come running, hands flailing, yelling for someone to get down. I don't care, not one bit. Noah's eyes go wide. He's frozen, mouth slightly open, cheeks blazing red, but somehow he doesn't run. He just stands there staring at me like he always does, that mix of awe and panic I know so well. They're yelling, Tate, what, he stammers, voice trembling. Let them stare, I shout again, leaning over the edge just enough for my words to carry. They don't get it, they never will, it's ours, Noah, always ours. I see the teachers, frozen and unsure, glancing at each other. Their faces twist in judgment and confusion. Students are whispering, some laughing nervously, others pointing, unsure if I'm serious or just insane. Perfect. Noah finally steps closer, his hand finding mine. You really love me, he whispers, still bright red. I lean down, pressing my forehead to his. I've always loved you, Noah, you don't need to understand all of it, just know, I'll always protect you, always. And in that moment, all the chaos, the stares, the judgment, it's nothing. Because Noah is here and he's mine, and that's all that matters. The faculty marched me into the main office, past trophy cases and framed photos of smiling graduates who had never done anything interesting in their lives. The secretary wouldn't look at me. Her mouth was tight, disapproving, like I'd said something obscene instead of true. The principal arrived 10 minutes later. He didn't sit, he paced. Do you have any idea, he said slowly, carefully, what you've just done? I said something out loud, I replied. That's usually how yelling works. His jaw tightened. You embarrassed this school. I laughed. I couldn't help it. No, I embarrassed you. That's when he slammed his hand on the desk. Meanwhile, Noah sat in a guidance office across the hall. I know this because later, much later, he told me everything. They didn't yell at him, that would have been easier. Instead, they spoke softly like he was fragile glass or something diseased. A counselor leaned forward, hands folded. Why would Tate say something like that, Noah? Noah stared at the carpet. I don't know. A teacher chimed in, voice syrupy and cruel. Do you encourage him? Noah shook his head quickly. No, I don't encourage anything. Another pause, then the question they'd been circling. Are you confused about your feelings? Noah swallowed, his hands twisted in his lap. He's special. They exchanged looks, the kind that said we know better. Back in the office, my parents arrived. My mother looked stunned, my father looked angry, but not at me, in the situation, at the mess, at your attention. This isn't a phase, the principal said, voice low, warning. This kind of display invites rumors. Rumors already exist, I replied. You just don't like that I stopped pretending. He turned cold. You are forbidden from interacting with Noah Lunas outside of supervised settings. My mother inhaled sharply. You can't do that. Oh, we can, he said, and we will for the boy's own good. That's when I stood up. For whose good, I asked, because it's never been Noah's. The punishment came fast. Separate classes, different lunch periods, a seating chart designed like a prison layout. They never punished the kids who whispered fag under their breath, never disciplined the ones who shoved Noah's books off his desk by accident, never addressed the notes stuffed into his locker, but me. They watched me like a loaded gun. And Noah paid for it. The first day after the shout, 3 boys cornered him near the lockers. So, one sneered, leaning too close, you got a boyfriend now. Noah tried to step away, they blocked him. Did you ask him to scream that, another said, or are you just that desperate? I didn't, Noah whispered, I didn't ask for anything. Sure you did, the first boy laughed, you probably begged. Noah didn't cry, he never cried in front of them. He waited. He waited until I saw. All it took was a look. I didn't touch anyone, I didn't have to. They scattered. At lunch, a girl leaned across the table toward Noah and said loudly,